RallyCast episode 40. This week I'm running solo as my partner in crime Ian Holmes had other obligations. It's a bit of a makeup episode as technical difficulties rendered our attempted recording a couple weeks ago unusable. That said, we have back with a special guest, Sam Albert of the DirtFish Rally team. We discuss the Ojibwe Forests Rally and how in a scary moment his brake pedal became the gas pedal, and the challenges from the high altitude, tight and twisty, hot and dry Idaho Rally International. This is Open Paddock, the RallyCast. Well, hello, and as I said in the intro for this Open Paddock RallyCast, we have with us special guest Sam Albert of the DirtFish Rally team, and we're going to go over a little bit of Ojibwe, and then, of course, the most recent event, Rally Idaho. Sam Albert, welcome back to the show. How you doing this evening?
Not too bad, Mike. Glad to be back on the show. Always looking forward to having these conversations.
So, we're going to start with Ojibwe. I know it was a little bit ago, a little bit of a gap that we've had. You know, I have to say that of the events I've traveled to, roads-wise, that's got to be one of my favorites.
Yeah, I agree. It's got some of the most, I don't know, they're not technical, they're not fast, they're somewhere in between. They're just a lot of fun to drive on, and you know, when they're dry, they're extra quick. When they're wet, they're extra slick. So it presents a unique challenge depending on how the weather comes at it, which seems to change year by year. Usually get some sort of precipitation. This year wasn't so bad. It actually helped for the most part, but you know, a couple of the stages weren't so nice.
Well, let's talk about just how it started to begin with, right? We had like an overnight rain before that one started. And they had a little super special that they created right at the little fairgrounds there. Kind of simple, just kind of went around. It looks like it's normally just like I think it's just a horse track, right? And, you know, they had this little jump that they made, which normally would have been fine. Although, don't take it in a rental truck, which Matt Kalish ended up finding out. Because he went a little too fast. And, well, he didn't break the truck, thankfully, but many things went flying, let's say.
Well, I mean, what else are you supposed to do with the rental truck?
Yeah, there you go. Anyways, you know, short little stage there. Shouldn't have been anything, but we got that downpour of rain the night before. It really wasn't raining when you guys were leaving for that first stage, but nobody really went out on track to see what the surface was like versus it was bone dry for a long time when you guys actually did recce, right?
Yeah, it was perfectly dry when we recce'd it.
So, first car, first turn. Travis Pastrana.
Yep. Yeah, he pulled a good one on that.
Honestly, I think that's got to be the shortest rally somebody's ever had. Literally first in, first out, you know?
Yep.
Programming people will like that term. But yeah, it just, he slid on that. It just became muck. It was like a clay-like soil that soaked up all of that water, and it was, God, it must have been 3 or 4 inches deep right at the approach to that. But you wouldn't have seen it because not a lot of people had gone over it yet.
Right.
And so you didn't see like a big trench in there or anything like that. So he just goes like he normally would, turned the car. It didn't turn, and you guys didn't know that they put concrete barriers out there, did you?
No, yeah, during recce, it was just kind of wide open, and there was a big gap on either side of the jump where it looked like, well, if you didn't hit the jump, you could just go right around it if you wanted to, but that definitely wasn't the case come race day.
You know, unfortunate. He smacked one of them and, you know, made the barrier turn, broke his left rear suspension. They made it to the end, but barely. Unfortunately, the parts on the car, not really repairable. And from there, you guys actually had to transit like 40 miles to the other stages. So
right.
It was a pretty long commute that you're not going to be able to limp through. So what was that first stage like for you? Because I'm sure a lot of people in line saw what happened to Travis. Did you know that he had already gone off or no?
I didn't know they had gone off at that point when we were getting lined up, but you know, when we were lining up and everybody's kind of moving in on their minute to start it, everybody's kind of jockeying for position to see if they could see through, you know, the stands and the walls and stuff that were lining the track there. So we were all trying to kind of get an idea, but yeah, didn't see. Travis was a little, because he was first car up there, didn't quite see what he was doing. I saw you know, like Seahorn and Higgins go through it, and didn't seem to be bad from what I saw. So I was like, all right, well, we'll just go. Because really what we were trying to figure out is like, how are we going to hit this jump? Is it going to be flat out? Are we going to check up before it? And so I think a lot of us were talking beforehand that we were just going to kind of check up, a little bit on it. Just, it's the first stage of the rally. There's nothing to really be won there. So if you lose a second or two, just checking up for the jump, it's more important to make sure that you make it through to that end of that stage so you can go, do battle out in the actual stages. But yeah, once we finally started, it was so mucky that the power wasn't going down. So there wasn't really a need to check up. You just kind of drove up to the jump. And, I watched Pastranda's onboard from that they had posted. And I think it just came out on Launch Control too. And you can see both how Travis hit it and how Higgins hit it, and it looks like Travis just got on throttle and just stayed pinned going through that first corner where Higgins did a little turn to the outside before turning back in. I think that helped get him a little bit more sideways going through the first jump, which gave him the appropriate run up to the jump. So you can see like both of them have two very, very different lines going over it, and that unfortunately, he kind of misjudged what that barrier was and just kind of stayed committed to it and ultimately paid the price for that. But once we finally got going, we got over that jump. When we got to the first corner, I go to, make that turn in, and the car just didn't turn. It's like, all right, we're along for the ride. And Michelle and I almost started laughing a little bit in the car, like, okay, so this is how it's going to be.
And you guys weren't going that fast. It was like one of those almost like 20 miles an hour on ice kind of feelings, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was just the car started going sideways. We're sliding, gas, brake, didn't really do much of anything. So we just kind of waited it out until the car found traction again. And then once we finally got going again, it was not too bad after that. It was just the first little stretch that was just all clay, mud, nastiness. And after that, it was fine. Like the second corner or I guess the third corner, it wasn't too bad. And after that, you go into that big loop that circled around to the finish, and that was fairly clean. So it got better as you went through it.
I think you, what was the description you said? Toothpaste?
Yeah, a lot of the stages, at least in the beginning, while it was still pretty well soaked, turned into this toothpaste-like consistency where you just don't really have a whole lot of traction. You're kind of my method for going through stuff like that is kind of start your turn in really early while you still have grip, and then once you're in the corner, because for whatever reason, just how roads are made, corners are where moisture tends to collect. So that's where the least amount of grip generally is going to be. So if you set your turn in early, you hit that toothpaste or whatever it is sideways, at least by the time you're through the corner, you're pointing it in the right direction. You can get back on gas and continue on your way.
So you go out from there, you're heading out to, again, really long stretch of a transit. Then you get out to the stages that are out there in I guess it would be more the northeast part of the state, or that area,
Right.
and a little bit farther away from the Saturday stages. And that's where we get to the famed jump that we have at Crossroads.
Right.
Some of those stages pretty well because you've raced out there a couple of times now. Again, it was a little bit wet, but like you said, it brought some of the no dust issues or anything like that. A little bit slippery. You were doing okay. We saw you go past on the jump, but then something happened.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate early thought to be the end of our rally. Luckily, we were able to super rally. But yeah, we were going along on Crossroads, and we were just getting to the last little tricky bit of that stage, which actually was a lot of fun. It gets, where the jump is and all that is it's sort of open. There's just lots of fours and fives and things like that, and then it starts getting a little bit tighter, and you got get down to your threes and fours, and so it gets fun. You get to toss the car around a little bit more, and unfortunately, we were going through this good little section, and we coming up as a little straight. Coming up to this little hill, and I go to brake for the next turn, and the pedal just goes to the floor, and I realize that we've lost our brakes. And as we're coming up that hill, I'm trying everything. I'm pumping the brakes, grab the handbrake. The handbrake just goes all the way back, so find out that it's the rear brakes that have gone.
Oh no.
And normally that's not such a big deal. You can you normally engineer the brakes to have two separate circuits, which we have on our car. But in this strange set of circumstances. The way that our bias adjuster was set up made it such that when you fully depressed the brake pedal and it went all the way down, the cable interfered with the throttle pedal, and so it actually pushed the throttle as we were going over that crest. And the notes, I can't remember exactly what the turn is. It's like a 3 right over crest, don't go wide. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to abide by the don't go wide rule when I was on the gas going over this crest, and it just sent us right over the other side, go into the side of the road, take out a bunch of trees. And for a moment there, I almost thought we were going to be able to pull it off because we were riding through the trees. I was on gas because I was on the brakes, which is just odd, but we end up hitting this big mound, and then that ends up rolling us, and we end up on our roof, and we're just barely off the side of the road, but fully upside down. And once we got out of the car, we assessed the damage, and there was broken control arms and things like that. So the car, even if we were able to find a way to roll it back over and get on the road, there was no way that thing was going to be driving off in its current or in its state at that time. So unfortunately, that was the end to day one for us. And we were able to get our crew out there to get us a tug. The sweep crew came through and did a fantastic job of getting the car upright and getting it right along the side of the road, which made it really easy for us to just hook up some come-alongs and whatnot to pull it into the trailer. And luckily for us, it was there was going to be a good little gap because they were going to repeat Crossroads for the night running of it. So there's a good gap in the window there that we were able to get the truck and trailer in there and get the car off. And once we did that, got it back to service, everybody went to town, came up with a good game plan, and got everything fixed. And our goal was to restart on Saturday, which luckily we were able to do.
I must say, first of all, hats off to those good sweep crews. I know we've got a pretty good crew out here in the Northwest. Those guys, let me tell you, they just constantly think geometry to get the car, rolled over back, in a way that it can get out safely, but not cause any more damage to the vehicle, right?
Yeah, they did a fantastic job.
And that's just huge. A lot of people, I think, that don't follow rally close enough don't understand just how important that skill is, because getting cars out from these, obstacle-laden places, you can do more damage maybe than the incident itself if it's not done right. And
oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing what these guys do. They got a lot of experience. And so here to the sweeps. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is your teammate actually didn't do much better than Travis Pastrana.
No, unfortunately he didn't. And that was actually a really unfortunate circumstance for him because instead of coming in and just kind of sideswiping the barrier how Travis did it when Pastrana did it, when Pastrana hit the car, it twisted that concrete barrier out. So now instead of hitting it broadside when Travis' niece came to it, it was pointed right at him. So he just center punched the middle of his car right on the
corner of it.
On the corner of it, yep.
Yeah, jeez.
Crunched in his crash bar, radiator, and that definitely did him in as well for that rally. But as you know, we got him back into the service too, and everybody was working on his car. They were working on my car, and luckily both of us were able to get started, the next day. And it was a bit of a late night, but not too bad by rally standards. By the time all the cars were running and we got the okay from the officials that the cars looked good to rally again and were stage worthy.
And you guys were all hands on deck. I mean, everybody was doing something. This is one thing that I also want to mention. Just, the DirtFish crew, but you out there as well. I saw you out there with a grinder, cutting away at stuff. Everybody's pitching in wherever they can to help get these cars running. I don't know if any of the other crews ended up helping you guys out a bit. I know that there was a new radiator had to come from a long ways away for Nice. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. Another rallyist who was, just watching from, Facebook or whatever, saw that Travis was in need for a radiator, and he hopped in the car with his girlfriend and drove all night. And I remember he showed up to our Airbnb, knocked on the door at like 2 a.m. I was like, what is going on here? Who's this? Open the door, and he's standing there with a radiator in his hand. And we're like, all right, come on in. So that was pretty cool to see.
That is awesome.
It's always nice to have the community, pitch in and help, keep the rally moving and keep everybody in the game.
So, you really have to really reassess things, when you're doing Super Rally, which thankfully this year they have. They didn't have that last year. Some people dislike Super Rally. I'm a fan of it because I know that even if you're not getting, you're not going to necessarily get way up there in the points or whatever. I think there needs to be sufficient penalty to come back. We don't want to have someone that, ends up Super Rallying and then all of a sudden they're, finished still in the lead, or
Right.
something like that. But, I like the fact that especially with more of the privateers and whatnot, you guys get stage miles, right? I mean, seat time is everything, and there's only so many opportunities. It's not like we have 20 races a year.
Right.
We've got 7 in the championship, and I really like seeing you guys out there. It's good for the fans, good for the sponsors. It's kind of good for everybody if you can get out there. But what's your opinion of Super Rally, and how do you have to reassess yourself when you go back into that next day?
Yeah, so I'm a fan of Super Rally for sure, kind of for the similar reasons that you said, just being able to get back out there, get more seat time and all that stuff. And I do think it's necessary to have a pretty severe penalty, in which I think the current rule set is, pretty well spot on. And I think that's pretty, I'm not sure if it's standard across the board with other sanctioning bodies, but I know it's pretty close. And, I can't remember off the top of my head what our penalties ended up being for missing, I think, 3 stages in the end, 3 or 4 stages, but it was something like a 30-minute penalty.
Wow.
And that's a lot. That's a lot of time that you have to make up, and it's kind of how it should be. And when we started back up on Saturday, I don't think we quite thought that we were going to be able to do as well as we did. We were just going to kind of take advantage of the seat time and keep working on learning how to drive the car faster and do what we need to do. But it's still in the back of your mind that, okay, well, we kind of lost one of our 9 lives yesterday, so let's make sure that we get a finish in. And at that point, our game plan was just, let's make sure that we finish so that we can get some points for both the class and the overall championship. And then as the day was kind of going by, we were seeing that we were, still picking up time, and we started having a battle, I think, with Tim O'Neill. And we're like, well, if we keep on pushing a little bit more, it looks like we might be able to surpass him. And ultimately, that's what we did, and that got us to the third overall, or not third overall, but third in the class finish for the event. And I think that was a fantastic place to be, considering you got Jeff on the top step, and then you got the return of Nick Roberts coming out in the class, and so it was always good racing against him and having him back there. But
It was really good to see him out there. It's been far too long for someone that was competing for a championship for multiple years. I hope we see more of him.
I hope so too. Fantastic driver and good people. So always good having him out in the mix.
So you were able to make it all the way back to the podium. Obviously, a pretty good result after what was a trying thing. Obviously, don't wish anybody else to have any issues out there. Yeah, I was going to say one of the other significant things that we had out at Ojibwe before we kind of move on to talk about Idaho was we had a WRC driver out there. Brian Bouffier did his second event in North America with driving the green APU car for Art Grushka, that little Mitsubishi Mirage. I was hoping it was going to be a little bit more on pace versus the Subarus, but it's still effectively a privateer car, right?
Yeah, it's a privateer car, even though it's very well built and it's a very quick car. It's, even if they were to be given equal cars, I think David and they were also battling with Travis on Saturday for stage wins, and I think that institutional knowledge that just they have of these roads is really difficult to overcome. When they've raced on that, on all the stages were the same, but sections of them were just the general flow and knowing that surface plays huge into your confidence and how hard you can push and charge on those stages. And I think for a newcomer to come in and try to be on pace with them is going to be a very, very difficult battle.
On that Saturday is when Matt and I got to go out to, I think it was stage 9, and we did a live stream from that one, and probably one of the better live streams we got to do for this year, because I thought it was a really good corner. It was like kind of a double apex, and it kind of went downhill, and it had this crown, and around at an intersection. and you could see when somebody that got it right right away, and those that got it wrong, they went way wrong. They were sliding all the way over by where we were, over by the banner tape, because just that crown was so big. But one thing we also noticed is that soil there is so different. This is one thing I love about rallying in the U.S. is, yeah, we've got this huge country and it's hard to travel from place to place, but boy, does it make for some very different conditions, because I kept seeing as cars went by, this soil starting to rut up and it's getting sandy. It's starting to like bog down and get pretty thick, loose sand kind of in spots, even though it was damp from the rain from the day before. Made for drivers having to take a different approach, I think, going up to it. What was that like for you? I guess having to deal with those constantly changing stages with it. It seemed like to me most of the slow corners are really starting to dig out.
Right. Yeah. So, one thing that you do, because that's pretty characteristic of the entire rally, is that you got a lot of that sand. And so it takes away a little bit of that bite that you get when you get on the brakes and you come into your corner. So a little bit of car setup to help with that. One thing that we did is raise up the rear of the car so that we could throw a little bit more weight in, because you're on the brakes for longer and softer when you come into turns like that.
Ah, okay.
Instead of pushing, like how you would do on something really, firm and kind of like Olympus type roads, where you can come in super late, get on that brake, get the weight transfer, get the rotation done, then get right back on gas and continue on your way.
Almost tarmac style, just with a little bit of slide in there.
Yeah, I mean, just really aggressive. Whereas the Ojibwe roads, you have to kind of treat with a little bit more caution. So, yeah, you're braking a little bit softer so that you don't, something that we teach at DirtFish is the 100% traction rule, that, your tires can only do 100%. And if you are braking at 100% and you go to turn and you have nothing left to turn with, well, you're not going to turn. So you kind of have to share that traction with braking and trying to turn in a little bit. So, that's kind of leads you to your classic trail brake. But with the surface being less grippy than other roads, you have to take that with a little bit more caution. Kind of like how you do with, conditions when they start getting damp in other places. You just have to come in a little bit softer on the brakes and just make sure that you're managing the grip, especially on the front end of the car.
Well, like I said, Ojibwe, great rally. I love the roads. To me, it's probably the closest. To me, it's kind of like you get some of the speed that you would get like at New England, and some of the flow mixed with the trees being real close like STPR.
Yep, I'd agree with that. It's a pretty unique rally, and it's also one of my favorites as well. It's some of the best roads in the country.
Yeah, so those of you folks on the West Coast, geez, you guys that listen to the show, get out there. It's worth the travel. It's worth the trip just to do those stages at least once, because just recce alone was just fun. I'm just like going along and just like, wow, at speed, this would be so cool. Yeah, so, some of the best stuff there, just kind of constant crests and dips, and yeah, just fun looking roads. So rather jealous. I would definitely like to try those someday. All right, so Ojibwe, you still end up on the podium, still in contention for the championship. Anything can happen, especially the way the drops work with the East Coast and West Coast stuff. And then we head over to Idaho. Idaho Rally, brand new as a championship event, national championship. Very different roads for most everybody. Now, have you competed in Idaho before?
Yeah, I did it once in 2015.
Okay, so you did in 2015. I think Jeff did it then as well, or something like that. Yeah, so
there as well.
Both of you guys are out there. Okay. But for the majority of competitors, other than some regionals that have been out there, very new roads, very different. Now, is kind of some were saying it was a good joke to everybody, because most people that reviewed online footage and whatnot was probably from that era, from 2015, or from 2016 even. Roads were a little bit different this time.
Yes, they were. One of the classics has returned for this year, Harris Creek, in both directions, which is, I don't know if it's my favorite stage in all of North America, but it's definitely up there in the top 5, just with how fast and flowing that road is, and it kind of starts getting a little bit more technical as you get closer to the hills, and it starts to climb up a little bit. But yeah, it's so fun, so fast, and I don't know what it is about it. I think it's just because it's a little extra wide so that you know that you can really just hammer down going through a lot of those corners and know that it'll be pretty safe. Just makes it a little bit more fun to have that sort of freedom on a stage that you don't really find in most other stages, at least in the U.S. So being able to do that stage is super fun, but the other ones kind of changed up. You still had Grimes Pass, which had a little bit of a variation this year, had a little extra techie bit added to it, but it still finished out on a nice fast section of road. That was fun. But then everything else I hadn't seen before. Most others hadn't seen before, unless they had been there last year, like with, I think it's Meadow Creek. Super crazy technical stage that is difficult in these newer cars. You know, all these cars get a little bit bigger, a longer wheelbase and sort of wide, and it's just a lot to move around. And I was getting a little bit of a arm workout going through there, just
yeah,
left
yeah.
and right. Yeah.
So I got to recce a couple of stages as well. And again, another unique area. I've never been to this event, even though it's one I've been told to go visit for many years. Just it never worked out schedule-wise for me. So it used to run, I think, in June when it was a regional event or something like that. So usually conflicted with other stuff. But very hot, very dry, very high altitude. We were what, like probably 4,500 feet out there?
Yeah, I think all the stages were in the 4,000 and 5,000, so that actually played a little bit into the competition as well, because you lose, a good bit of power as you start heading up. And these cars, they just, especially, well, really all the cars are going to be somewhat suffocated from the lack of air up there. So both drops the power level and, reduces the ability to cool too. I mean, you'll have less dense air. You don't have as much air density blowing through those radiators and cooling the engine down. So overheating was a problem I heard for a lot of people, including us.
Plus, you throw in temperature. I mean, it was cool in the morning, actually downright cold at times. But when it gets upwards of 80 degrees at that altitude, me from my flying background, 95 degrees ish is about equal to 3,000 feet of altitude from an air density standpoint. If you've got 80 degrees and you're at 4,500 feet, your air is even that much thinner, right? So that you're right. The cooling factor is definitely a huge issue out there. Again, just super dry. Gosh, we were just drinking gallons of water out there trying to stay hydrated. And of course, this is a pine forest out here. So we're out in these high mountains. It's all like ponderosa pine, so it's not super dense trees, but it is definitely a full-blown forest. And very mountainous. You were talking about Harris Creek there. I got to recce on Spanish Fork, one of the really tight technical stages, and it's just switchback after switchback. There's so many hairpins going down deep into a ravine, then climbing back up out, and it is some serious technical stuff. But at the same time, I thought it was one of the greatest things to have in the championship because it was just so different than anything else. On the one hand, I understand wanting to have that smooth flow, but having something technical that everybody has to really think about every corner,
right?
I know, to me, I thought was really cool from a fan standpoint. Granted, I can understand the frustration as a driver. That's got to be pretty hard because you're trying to get a rhythm to be consistent, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to, sound like I'm going to complain about the stages, but some of them were great. Like Grimes, even the techie bits, Meadow really wasn't as bad as a lot of people made me think it was. I think Spanish Fork was probably the worst in terms of how the road got kind of beat up, and, throughout the rally. And it's it's a repeat stage. So when we came through one of the times, and it's just so technical, and it got so deep that like the car was just struggling to get through it. It wasn't. To me, it didn't really feel like I was racing the car. It was just more like I got to get this thing to the end of the stage.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Another thing before we start getting into kind of how things went throughout the weekend is a pretty good turnout. Again, first time being a national championship. So we had I think 43 vehicles starting. And I say vehicles because this is the first time the American Rally Association had side-by-sides as part of the championship. We had Brendan Semenuk with John Hall coming down from Canada that competed. We had a couple other guys. I think somebody from California and some regional guys in the area that I unfortunately wasn't familiar with their names, but we had about four or five different side by sides out there. What do you think about having side by sides as part of this rally championship?
I think it's pretty cool. I think, side by sides caters to a larger market than, rally cars do in the US. So bringing that attraction in for, people, there's, tons of people that have Razors and, Mavericks and stuff like that in the States, especially in the Western US. So I think it's really great to add them on. Michelle and I were even talking, should we start thinking about maybe moving to a side by side or something like that in the future? Or, like where is it going to go long term? And I just think their popularity, caters to a broader market. So how we can integrate them into, the championship is, I think it's a great direction to go, and I think it needs some refinement, just like anything new. But it's really cool to see them out, and I'm curious to see how they'll do at Tour de Forest coming up here. It's logistically challenging, with not all states being, friendly to side-by-sides and letting them transit on the roads and stuff like that. So that could be, a challenge further on down the road, especially the more eastern events. But
and Oregon's the same way. We don't have the ability to have them transit on the public roads out here. So, yeah, it's a challenge. But as they become more popular, maybe we'll see more pressure of counties being able to have different rules than maybe what the state has, to allow that kind of stuff. But as it sits currently, Oregon Trail, we were going to try it maybe earlier this year, but the challenge was figuring out how we would be able to do some of those trans. Like, okay, can we make them do at least part of the rally, and you'd trailer them to the start, and maybe you could do a short loop of stuff in an area that, where the roads are mostly closed, as long as they don't get on the highway or something like that, and trying to coordinate and find a way to do that. We just didn't have the loops of stages in a way that made that worthwhile just yet. So we might be able to do something, but we'd have to be very creative in how you do it, and there'd have to be some trailering involved. So a little bit of complexity to throw in there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the number one problem with having them out there is just getting them to the stages.
It was interesting also to see the Brendan with his side-by-side. He put rally tires and rally wheels on his, which I thought was interesting.
I noticed that too, and I think that's actually becoming a little bit more of a trend. I saw David Sturks race out in Gorman and won the event, and he was on rally tires as well. So it seems to be working out pretty well for him. I don't have any experience on a side-by-side with rally tires, so I don't know personally how they perform, but he won the event out in Gorman, and Semenuk did great at Idaho, so I'm assuming that it works pretty well.
Yeah, it seemed too. I did get a chance to talk to Brennan for a little bit, and he said that it was a predictable amount of grip with those tires, like he's familiar with the car. I mean, the vehicle is obviously different, but he could have trust in the tires in the same way that he was used to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that might be the same reason that David did it out in Gorman, just that they both came to side-by-sides as rally drivers first, so just kind of eliminating one of the variables and just trusting that those tires are going to do what you expect them to do probably plays a big part in just having the confidence to go out there and go fast from the get-go.
Well, one thing I will say is for Idaho, I was sorely missing Barry McKenna and Leon Jordan being out there, because I think that would have been an event they had a really good shot at probably winning.
Yeah, I think those roads definitely would have lent to that little fiesta. Being able to get that thing just flicking around through those stages, I think he would have had a really good shot of getting the overall for Idaho for sure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we see him back in the States again racing. And I know he's still going for that championship there in Ireland. But anyways, the other thing I was going to say about these roads is dusty. The type of dust specifically. I noticed in some of the hairpins, it was like this really light, silty dust. The only thing I could think of comparing it to, and this is just from people going by on recce, it getting thicker and thicker, not even when they're racing. And it was almost like what they call fesh when you watch the Dakar. That super silty, light dust stuff. That's very different from any other rally that we have. I don't think that we get that super fine stuff anywhere else, do we?
At least not all over the place like it is at Idaho. That sort of moon dust sort of
Moon
exists.
dust. There we go. There you go. That's a perfect analogy.
It exists in sections, but it never really becomes a factor. But at Idaho, it was just all over the place. So yeah, like you said, it just would get up in the air and it would just float around. It's so light that it never really settles. It just keeps floating, and there was a serious lack of wind at Idaho, at least for that weekend. So it hung around and it didn't go anywhere.
So we go into the first day there. Obviously, we have this first loop is you get to do that Harris Creek is the very first stage. All the cars are running what they were originally going to start at 3-minute gaps for the first three, and then 2-minute gaps then on?
Correct.
Right. And then they first noticed the dust right there on that stage, didn't they?
Yeah, we were sitting at the start line just watching the first few cars go and just saw the dust was just building and building and building. Like, oh man, this might not be so good. And sure enough, we get in there and we take off, and the first little bit's kind of okay, and then the valley kind of gets a little bit deeper, and we go around a corner and it's just walls of dust everywhere. And it's kind of a bummer because that's one of those stages where you just want to go hard and go fast, and it's a good opportunity being a little bit of a longer stage to kind of set the pace from the get-go, and either work for a lead or try to build a little bit of gap to people behind you. And you just weren't able to do it on that stage. He was just, all right, well, I'm not gonna go over this corner and not know where the road is gonna end up. You go to turn in, and a lot of times you turn in early because you hear the note and you're like, okay, I got to turn in. You turn in, there's a wall. Oh, wait, nope, turn back out. All right, here it is. And so it's just you're second guessing.
You're recorrecting constantly throughout the corner.
Yeah, so it loses a little bit of its fun, which is too bad because it's such a great stage. But luckily, they were paying attention to that and changed up the gaps for everybody, which I don't think I had ever heard of a 5-minute gap for any event ever in North America, and to have a 5-minute gap for the first cars, and I think we went to a 4-minute gap for everything behind that for the rest of the first day. I was just like, wow. But
yeah, that was pretty crazy. And now I'm going to throw in, because we were on the next stage, which is Grimes Pass. We were over at the spectator area, and as a guy doing media. Normally, I'm okay with a couple minutes between cars. You start talking about things that are going on, talk about the rally itself. It's a little bit harder at the beginning of the rally because you don't have any stories of what happened beforehand, right? You can talk about the roads that you experience on Recce and kind of the championship and stuff like that. When you have 5-minute gaps between cars... And
pretty quick, don't you?
you run out of things to talk about, man.
Yeah, I heard that was a bit of a challenge, not only from the media perspective, but also for spectators as well. I remember overhearing some people talking about how the gap was making them wonder if the rally was still going. So they'd just kind of sit around and be like, oh, well, maybe it's done. Maybe they stopped it, or maybe there was an incident. And so it was hard for people to judge if the race was still going. So they kind of lost a little bit of their interest just having to sit there and wait so much.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit difficult from that standpoint. This year was probably not the most spectator friendly for Idaho. I'll definitely give them that. And there were a bunch of people that came out. I'll say hats off to the media blitz that they did. There was local TV station covering it. There were people from a local radio station I saw out at Park Expo that we had at the Subaru dealership out there. Larry H. Miller, I think it was. Right. There was a pretty good media, involvement for this rally. So a lot of people came out and were excited to see stuff. Just, yeah, it unfortunately just the situation with the dust. Then we had a fire, unfortunately, on that Grimes Pass stage. Now, you made it through before the fire happened, right?
Yeah, we had made it through. We didn't see anything on that, so not really sure where or how it got started. But I think, our teammate Travis Neese was the first one actually that stopped for it. and they got out of the car, and I think they made a quick assessment like, oh, there's no way that we're putting this out, because it was, I mean, I guess it had gone like tens of meters wide and was starting to climb up the hill, and there was just nothing that they could do. So they motored on to the next radio point and got that called in, and luckily it seemed like there was a very quick response to it. So hats off to all the firefighters and stuff that responded and took care of it as best they could, as quick they could. But yeah, unfortunately, it red crossed the stage for a lot of people behind us. So I think Travis would be the first one that it didn't get a time for that stage, but and so that everybody in the field behind him also had to go with the times. I think it was probably Burke that set the time for everybody else to take for that stage.
Speaking of which, Seamus Burke coming all the way from the East Coast. He hasn't done a full national championship and come out west for like a decade or something. I think he said last time he was out this way was like 2006 or something like that. So
yeah, it sounds about right. And I think he's hungry. He he sees that he's in a championship battle for the 2-wheel drive class, and he's not too far off of us in the overall too. So I think he might be hoping that something might happen to us here at Tour de Forest, and then he could capitalize off of that, and he might end up, being on the overall national podium.
That's a good point. I didn't think about the overall, but definitely at least with an open 2-wheel drive championship, between him and Eric Potts, Eric and Claudia have gone to every single event, and again, how the things work out between East Coast and West Coast and how you do your drop, there's still opportunity, and he saw that opportunity, and it was just great to see that team and that car come all the way out here, because it's fun to talk about some of the folks that we see out east, but I want to see some of those guys come out west, and vice versa, so they can experience what we experience. And yeah, good to see them make it all the way out here. But talking about the altitude that we did earlier, they were having some issues apparently with that car and being really down on power, and that's what they were thinking was probably a problem.
Yeah, so, it's definitely going to be a technical challenge for those cars. At least Eric Potts has a supercharger in that BRZ, so he can at least try to cram as much air in there as he possibly can. It definitely helps. The NA cars, I believe, suffer a little bit more than the turbo cars do, just because we get that advantage of trying to just shove as much air as we possibly can, in there, which definitely helps.
Obviously Grimes Path, you guys got to make it through and be at pace on that one. Then you get up to Spanish Fork. Things are delayed because of the fire. Yeah, they did get under control, like you said. So it did burn a bit for sure. Everything worked procedure-wise, right?
Yep.
Travis Neese saw it. He went to the next radio point, alerted everybody. Fire department goes out, puts it out. Just that's what we do. We have those procedures in place for a reason. So, unfortunately, the spectators didn't get to see much more because whatever started it, it ended up, stopping that stage. But you get up to Spanish Fork, and again, that was the one that I got to recce a little bit. I guess what I was going to ask you is, what's it like with those tight corners, trying to keep that power up when you've got so many slow corners and you're trying to keep that turbo spooled?
Yeah, it's what I found to work was just trying to keep that car constantly moving. So with it being so tight and not wanting to, come completely off a throttle and just try to drive through it, was just to kind of do a small little pendulum around every single one of those, the ones and twos, as best as you could. Sometimes the road didn't really lend itself to be able to do that, but yeah, if I found that if I just constantly kept the car sliding around, that was a lot easier to get around those corners, so you could stay on throttle. But the problem with that, when you're driving the car that hard, is that it takes a beating.
Right.
So what ended up happening to us pretty early on is that when you're on throttle so much and a low speed situation, which presents a pretty big load to the car, constantly being in that sort of load with that amount of throttle is just it's overworking the car. So we started overheating pretty quickly. With and without anti-lag, we turned anti-lag off, which is something that you don't particularly want to do on those stages. But you try to preserve the car, and even with that turned off, it still wanted to keep climbing. So
Wow.
we had to just manage it by how you drove the road, and so I had to back off the car quite a bit, just to make sure that it would survive for the whole event. And I knew that we had to finish. We had two not so great results leading up to Idaho, so we wanted to try to do our best to make sure that we got good points and keep the fight going through for the rest of the championship.
Well, one thing I noticed, look at the results after that stage is once we figured out that there was a 5 minute gap between the top cars, it was really great to see kind of a total even playing field of the top guys, right? So we had obviously David Higgins, Craig Drew out there. They're at every event, but we had the return of Patrick Sandell and Per Almquist as his co-driver to compete in their second U.S. round. They were at Olympus earlier in the year, and they put on a heck of a performance on that stage. I think they beat David by like 15, 20 seconds on that stage, something like that. And David was first on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I know Patrick was talking about the dust after Harris Creek, and getting that dust window seemed to really, really help them out, and he was able to put down a fantastic drive, not just on Spanish Fork, but really for the remainder of the rally. I think he did a fantastic job to put down some really incredible times, and it goes to show like how important having knowledge of the roads and video to study and stuff can be, because that I think that's what helps keep David at the top of the championship year after year, because he just keeps building that knowledge, and then once we have a wild card like Idaho get thrown into the mix, it really does help level things out. And Patrick is a fantastic driver, and he comes with a lot of experience overseas, and he was able to lay it down. And unfortunately for David, Patrick doesn't have a fight in the championship, so he's also able to kind of push a little bit more and not worry if he does end up having a DNF or having an off or something like that. So he's got that dynamic to struggle with, and I know that's been talked about before. But David has to have a very mature drive, and at the end of the day, it's about winning that championship, and so that's what he did.
And that is tough, isn't it? Having to think championship when you just always want to push as hard as you can.
Right, and I know he wants to.
I think that first day David did try. I think that first day was completely even for the most part. Maybe with a slight disadvantage to Patrick Sandell on that first stage, right, with Harris Creek and all the dust. But really after that 5 minute and 4 minute window. Well, I guess how was the 4 minute window for you guys?
It was totally fine. I mean, there were still pockets of dust, but it wasn't really affecting performance or times or anything.
Okay, that's good, because I mean, obviously we don't want to see dust be a huge issue, but it is definitely worse than driving at night, because it's not like you have headlights that can see through it or anything like that.
Yeah, that technology isn't quite up yet.
Yeah, right. That said, get through that first day. You guys are struggling a little bit with the power on the car. It looks like Seamus and Martin Brady end up doing well in that open two-wheel drive class, so they're kind of leading in that one. Jeff and Karen are doing okay. Jeff, actually, I was actually wondering how he was going to do, because he'd just slapped brand new suspension on that car and hadn't even really tested it.
Yeah, I think I heard that he got the final part of it at Park Expose and was like installing it that night or something. He didn't even show up to the rally with everything installed on the car.
Wow, that's got to be challenging. One of my favorite things that I got to do is when I was at the host hotel there in Boise, and darn it, I'm Brassfield, one of the regional guys. I caught them. They're working on their car right there. This Friday night, they're working on the car, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? You guys have a problem? It's like, nope, we just got new suspension, and apparently, in this case, I don't know what they were using at that time, maybe Olin's or something like that. But compared to what they had before, they now had like 30 different setting options versus 5.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like trying to figure out, what the hell do we do?
It's funny because Matt had actually messaged me that day asking me, what do I do with all this? So I gave him a good baseline to start with, and hopefully he got things figured out from there.
Because I mean, from a suspension standpoint, especially, again, you have some rough spots in there. You have the really tight corners, and whatnot. You're really trying to, I guess this is a rally where you want to have a lot of movement to be able to do with the car, right?
Right. Yeah.
How
You
would you
do.
set up a suspension like that?
I mean, it's just generally softening it up so that you can get the car moving around quite a bit. It's not so much to search for grip. A lot of it is just to get the weight transfer that you need for all the the slow speed section. So yeah, just keeping the car not so damped that it stays flat and it doesn't want to move around. You want it pretty soft, so you're just moving the weight around, getting that front end really loaded and get the rear of the car super light, so you can just get around the slower speed corners a lot easier. You harden it up as you start getting into the faster stuff, but yeah, for the most part, it's a pretty soft setup for those roads.
So we go into Sunday, the final day out there. Cooler. We get a little bit of a breeze, actually. They remove some of the dust window. I think it was, 2 minutes for you guys and then 3 minutes for the top for the rest of the rally?
Yeah, I think that's what it ended up being.
Did it end up being a big dust problem on that next day, or were we okay?
I remember there being a little bit of dust, but not anything that was really worth bringing up. I think it was good enough.
Now, they did end up, was it that Grimes Pass? Again, they noticed, because it was canceled, because of the delays from the fire and stuff, they had to cancel a whole loop of stages on the Saturday. You got to run Harris Creek again, but then on Sunday, Grimes Pass was in that loop, but the first running of that one, they had to skip it again because they saw another flare-up. Obviously, wood can smolder, and they caught that and had to put it out. You guys got to run it the second time, which was nice.
Yep.
One of the things that I worry about with some of these rallies is when you start running a stage more than twice. You're reconfiguring it slightly, but now you're running it 3-4 times. What is that like? I mean, you're running a different direction. I know you're going to have a different perspective a little bit of some of these stages, but how bad does it get after a fourth pass? Because I know they can get pretty beat up after two.
Yeah, so Grimes wasn't too bad since it had all the cancellations and a lot of people just transiting through or not even running through that section anymore. So that road wasn't too bad, but I think it really just comes down to how well the road can take it. There's some roads out there that you can run plenty of passes on and doesn't really change it up too much, but Spanish Fork did take quite a beating in a section of it, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, but it was just you're coming downhill and it's so beat up that you're braking so early because it's so soft, and you're already getting into lockup when it's so soft like that. So you start getting nervous about, well, how late can I carry speed into this corner and still be able to actually slow down and make it. And those are a lot of no consequence corners too. You go off on some of those roads and it's a long ways down. So you don't want to flirt with disaster very much. But at the same time, you got to put a fast time down, and you want to do well. So it's a really difficult battle of mitigating that risk, and it's a lot of those roads I don't like driving on them when they're that beat up. I know that's part of the challenge and stuff, but at the same time, you want to be able to enjoy what you're doing and get after it.
There's challenge, and then there's, oh my gosh, just trying to keep from dying.
Right.
So yeah, you definitely, there's got to be a fine line in there, and I think that the frustration for me, and again, this is just coming from the fan standpoint and spectators as well, is when you're running a stage, just reversing it and changing it up a little bit. If there is a cancellation for a situation like we had, it's not canceled just once. It's canceled twice. It's canceled 3 times.
Right.
And that's pretty frustrating when that's a spectator stage.
Yep.
And I think this rally specifically, the organizers, it was a lot bigger than I think they probably thought it was going to be.
Sure.
I think they probably thought it was going to be like their regional plus a couple of big guys would show up, and that's it. And I think there was a lot more to it than that. And granted it wasn't a horribly run rally by any means. But there's stuff to work on. Obviously coming from an event, being an organizer for an event that's been a national championship for a long time, I've got to learn some of the processes and procedures and things you have to do to make sure a national championship can go. And I think they just need to kind of learn a few things. But other than that, I welcome the challenge that they've brought. Although I did hear that the stage that was used for their press stage or the shakedown, that has got to be one of the most fun stages also. And a lot of people were like, why aren't we running this?
Right, and yeah, and I think in the original schedule that road was part of the rally, and then in the weeks leading up to it, it finally got taken away off of the schedule. So I don't know what happened there. I heard good things about that road too, and hearing from the guys that were able to do the press stage, it sounded like it was a lot of fun.
In the end, we ended up with a great victory by Patrick Sandell and Per Almquist. Again, they put on a clinic, I think, and David just backed off and with the championship in mind. But your chief competitor of Jeff Seahorn and Karen Jankowski, they ended up on the overall podium again.
Well, for sure. I mean, Jeff has put an incredible drive all year and last year really too. So the consistency that he's been able to put out is fantastic. Like it's definitely something that we want to emulate as well. And we don't quite have our formula figured out to be able to be 100% at his level. And it's going to take time for us to get things figured out and be able to be at that pace. I know that we can do it. It's just a matter of time and when that's going to be able to come to fruition. But yeah, I think Jeff and Karen do a fantastic job, especially for really doing everything out of Jeff's shop. It's awesome to see that he's able to perform at this level, and the car is doing great this year. He had a lot of technical problems last year that he was able to. It seems like he's got mostly figured out. So that's leading to him to constantly get these results that he's getting, and it's great. So. Yeah, it's definitely a benchmark for us, and our goal still is to start matching those times and hopefully exceed them at some point. And I don't know when that's going to be.
Well, obviously, you guys always put on a good show. You're always out there, getting closer and closer every time. The one thing that I think frustrates me for you guys a little bit is the whole thing about how dust windows are figured out. Because it's based on history, right? They get a little bit of an advantage of having at least some of these other events. Obviously they had the big dust window at this one, so it wasn't so bad. But at other events where it's like 1 minute gaps to everybody behind, and then they get a 2 minute gap, they're right behind the top guys, and you are maybe a couple cars back where you're just stuck with a 1 minute dust window, which is a big factor. That's twice as much in that case, not a third as much, not a fourth as much, right?
Yeah, that can definitely be frustrating at times, and I think at the end of the day, like we want it to be a fair competition. So yeah, it can be frustrating, but it's just how it is. There's not much that we can do about it. There's no sense in us really, dwelling on it. We'll just do the best with what we got, and we'll continue to try to push the best that we can and get the best result that we can.
Well, we love seeing this competition in the limited four-wheel drive. It's definitely the class to watch, in my opinion. There's more and more people looks like building cars and wanting to move up into that class and compete with all of you, and it just makes it that much better. And we just want to see more and more of it. Of course, it is the privateers class for sure. Still ended up second in class at this event, so a very good performance. But a lot of people just at the very end, the last couple of stages, had some issues.
Yeah, I think it was downhill for the vast majority of people, us included. With Travis losing that ball joint and popping his axle out and leaving him stranded on the side of the road. We had Dickinson, who would have beat us, I think, if he would have kept it all together after we started losing our pace. He was putting some good times down. Unfortunately, he rolled. Yeah, there was a few things that were happening within our class, and then luckily after we had our problem come up, we were able to limp the car to the end of the rally. But yeah, there was a lot of things going on at the last couple stages for sure.
I think it's just one of those things that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but where you just gotta, you're coming to the end, just keep your head on straight and stay focused. Don't think too far ahead. Think of that next stage, right?
Well, yes and no. Like I can understand how some people can see the opportunity. With us having the moving into two-wheel drive mode, for the last three stages that kind of opened up that opportunity to be like, oh, well, if we push a little bit more, we can make up the time because they're obviously losing it on every stage now. So if we push a little bit more, there's an opportunity we're going to pass them up and get, one higher step on the podium. So it's a tough thing to manage. And, I give it to them for trying, but unfortunately, if you try too hard, it doesn't quite work out.
So what exactly happened to you guys on that last loop? Because it was a differential.
So what ended up happening, we just took everything apart, and not sure what came first, but the axle definitely popped out at some point. But the differential broke inside of the transmission where it sits in the bearings that holds it together. So it essentially was just flopping around in the transmission, and it
Oof.
just completely grinded the pinion gear down to nothing. So the front wheels weren't getting any power whatsoever, and we cranked up the center diff to get as much as we can, to the rear of the car, and yeah, we were just in rear wheel drive for the last three stages, which was very difficult.
Well, I guess you know how Andreas Mikkelsen felt out there in Turkey then. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Very, very similar situation.
Yeah, definitely a challenging rally for everybody. Back to talking about the UTVs, though. Man, overall, fourth and fifth place were both UTVs overall. That's something. Those machines can take quite a beating for what essentially is a motorcycle on steroids.
Yep. They're pretty impressive vehicles, and everybody had already mentioned that the stages there lend itself to the UTVs, but at the end of the day, they're still very well made, and they're light, and their power to weight ratio is pretty impressive. So, I'm honestly not surprised that they're doing that well. You get a light vehicle like that with good power and good traction with tons of suspension
small
travel.
wheelbase.
Yeah, that thing's going to be able to go around stages like that, no problem. So, yeah, it's those guys did a fantastic job, getting through stages like that. Definitely something new to them, or at least to some of them, and fantastic job to them. Great result. It's pretty impressive.
I actually had an interesting conversation with Dave Higgins, and Dave was saying that he's okay with them being there as far as part of the championship, but one of his concerns is them being part of the overall championship. In other words, do something like make them skip the first stage or something so that it looks like the cars, from a comparative standpoint, are the top class.
Right.
On the flip side of that, I talked to John Hall, co-driver to Brendan Semenuk, and he's like, no, these things are equal. I mean, just they're part of it. If they can drive that fast in that vehicle and on the same stages and do the same stuff that we're doing and do the same transits, I don't care if they're on the overall podium. Thoughts?
It's an interesting argument. I think the number one thing that you probably want to look at is, what is rally? And, when you think rally cars, that's a production-based vehicle that's supposed to be meant for the road that you modify to be able to do stages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I see, wanting to have the spotlight on the cars for sure, and I do think that is important because that's what the root of rally racing is, to have another sort of vehicle come be part of the race. I do think it should be separate, just because it isn't a rally car, it's a UTV, right? So should it compete in the same rally national championship? Probably not. But I don't have a problem with them showing up to these stages and racing their own race and being part of the mix too. So I think I'm going to kind of side on David's opinion on wanting to have it be somewhat separate, but I'm totally cool with having them show up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way the laws are currently, there's no way they could do every event anyway from a championship standpoint. But
Right.
from an overall podium standpoint, they could still potentially be there for an event like this on an event basis.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see, now this is the first event that the UTV showed up at a national championship event, and then we got Tour coming up it'll be very interesting to see what happens at Tour when you have roads that are going to be a little bit more open. It's going to be a little bit quicker, and my guess is that the UTVs aren't going to be able to keep up like they were at Idaho.
Good point. Good point. So before we start talking about Tour de Force, I did want to mention real quick that we did have champions crowned after the Idaho Rally. Of course, David Higgins and Craig Drew are our overall national champions. Not really a big surprise there with nobody else in the other factory super doing the whole season. But, it was nice to see Barry McKenna and Leon Jordan try and put up a good fight through part of the season there. Some of it was bad luck on their part, but want to see them back for sure. That also secures them the Open Four-Wheel Drive Championship. Limited Four-Wheel Drive, of course, goes to Jeff Seymour and Karen Jankowski and the Seymour Rally team. And then in the naturally aspirated four-wheel drive, our friends at Primitive Racing, Blake and Tricia Lynn, the husband-wife team, because they made it out to an East Coast event, as well as competed in, so far, all of the West Coast events, they were able to secure the NA4 championship. And then in limited two-wheel drive, Jordan Guitar in that little Maxxis HPD Honda Civic, that guy, he just talk about consistency. Consistency is king. I mean, your teammate Travis Neese, other than the past two events, I can't remember with the last time he had a DNF.
Right. Yep. King of consistency for sure.
And it just shows how important that is. And those guys, even though they still, I think last I remember, they still had the CD player and air conditioning in their car. But the funny thing is that car, they still are fast.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I think that you can't be fast in a car that is like a limited two-wheel drive that just, isn't fully, all super rally prepped like an R2 Fiesta or something like that.
Right.
And yet they're up there all the time on a regular basis. For consistency, but consistency with speed, and it's really cool to see those guys do so well. So, congratulations on that, all those guys that have got the championship so far. But we still have an Open Two-Wheel Drive Championship heading into Tour de Force. Now, do you know any of these roads that have been used for Tour de Force? Because I don't know any of them.
I know one of them. Schaefer was in the Doo-Wop Regional Rally for the last couple of years.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that stage. Okay.
So that's actually a really nice, fun stage. Glad to see that to be part of Tour de Force. But as far as everything else, the only thing I know about them is what I've seen on the recce videos that they posted. So that's about it. Yeah, I haven't seen them.
So with the championship wrapped up, similar situation to David Higgins in this case. Patrick Sandell's going to be back again. You have nothing to kind of lose, obviously, the car, but with it not having to think about the championship anymore, does that change then how you're going to go into this final round? Or, is it all out and show that you can win?
Well, no, because we do have the threat of Seamus, who's
that's right. So for the overall, right.
Yeah, so for the overall, class, we obviously we don't have anything to worry about there. It still sounds like Travis Neese isn't going to be showing up, so that pretty much, if he's not going to show, then we'll get our second in class. But as the points currently sit, we are at 49 points for the overall, with Seamus at 42. So
that's close.
So 7 points separate us, and obviously we do have the pace to beat him, but that doesn't mean something can go wrong. It just takes another puncture or a part failure to change that up. And our goal is definitely to just drive very, very intelligently to wrap up the season and get third overall in the overall championship.
Smart man. I can't argue with that.
Yeah, as much as I'd love to just go out there and send it, and I wish we were in position to do it, that's just not the case. So we gotta do what we need to do and be smart.
So, obviously, the Northwest roads really well. Most of these roads, other than the Doo-Wop Regional, are going to be completely new. We got a clean slate for David and Patrick again. Who's your odds on?
Oh, man. That's a tough one to be in. I think that David is in his he's just found the right pace, and that's where he's going to kind of sit, and it's going to be hard for him to break out from. With him being new again, I kind of see it as being a repeat of Idaho. I think if everything goes well, Patrick did great after David's unfortunate DNF at Olympus. So Patrick already kind of knows the roads, and he still has nothing to lose. I mean, they both have nothing to lose, but I think Patrick just is going to be able to pull it off again.
I was chatting with John Buffum a little bit. If you watch some of the Facebook live streams we did with ARA, we stopped and talked to him a little bit about what was going on at Idaho with between Patrick and David Higgins, and he was pretty honest. He said, "You know what? I thought it was a fair fight, and the faster one today was definitely Patrick Sandell." He just flat out said it. Of course, then he came back and corrected himself and said, well, nothing against David. David obviously had to deal with a lot of dust it was Sunday when we were talking to him, and dealing with a lot of dust today, so there's no way he could really come back. But the rally was pretty much, won on Saturday there in Idaho. And I just thought it was funny to get that kind of honesty out of Buffum. Buffum's a great guy. It's taken a little while, I think, for both me to get comfortable talking to him and him comfortable in talking to me. And once you get comfortable around that guy, man, that guy's got so many stories.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Some that are not repeatable.
Yep, that is also true.
Anyways, Tour de Forest is our next event. It's in, just a week and a half?
Yep.
Wow. Well, I'm excited. New roads, areas I have not been. Obviously, it's still in the Pacific Northwest in the same general vicinity as the Olympus Rally. So I guess from doing the doo-wop thing that you've done before, are the roads out there similar as far as the kind of the rocky gravel that is out there? Or is it a little bit different?
So I've looked at some of their recce videos that they posted. It's really unique in that the organizers will go through with a GoPro and video all the stages beforehand, so everybody has an opportunity to do some video recce beforehand. But it's a little bit different than Olympus. It still has that element of very rocky, very abrasive. People will be going through a lot of tires, but it looks like some of its stuff kind of goes deep into some forest where it looks like the roads are still kind of wet in some spots. And we haven't had a whole lot of rain. I mean, we've had some, but it definitely looks like that there's going to be some sections where traction isn't going to be quite like what it was at Olympus. So it kind of goes into some trees. It gets really dark, and it looks like moisture just sticks around for a while, and the road's pretty narrow. There's a little bit of foliage on it. It looked like they were clearing, roads like with, machetes and stuff.
I thought I saw that too. I'm like, wait, this looks like a road that hasn't been driven on in 5 years.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see what that's going to be like. I remember seeing some stages like that at an older Olympus where it just it gets really narrow and there's not much of a shoulder on either side of the road that's been cleared out. So it's just a lot of just double track going through. Yeah. So it looks like it'll be a little bit narrower and maybe a little bit more challenging. I won't say technical, but challenging in some spots. So curious to see what it'll be like. It should be fun.
Well, I'm definitely excited to see it. Of course, I will be up there with Matt Kalish trying to get whatever video streams we can for this event. Like I said, closer to me, which is great, so I can just drive up there. So that'll be nice for me as well. Speaking of the Olympus area, for those of you that have not watched yet or have not tuned into it, there's that Shifting Gear show on the Discovery Channel. Did you watch that first episode?
I have not yet. I don't have access to Discovery.
Oh, you're one of those cable cutters.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that do that. I think they still do some sort of streaming or something through something. I don't know how you get it. But anyways, for those that haven't watched it, that's the one with Aaron Kaufman where they did that normally aspirated four-wheel drive build and of a GC Subaru. And the first episode that we saw, we had a group of us all get together at Beermongers here in Portland because Krista Skoukas, who was the co-driver to Aaron Kaufman, she hosted that. It was kind of cool to watch with a group of rally friends and watch that first episode. Not a lot of rally stuff so much as the build stuff going on with the car, other than he did some Rally Ready, that Texas school that teaches kind of similar to kind of DirtFish. They got kind of a skid pad kind of thing, right?
Right.
not so much gravel as is like a clay dirt that they're kind of driving on. But, a similar concept where they're, the weight transfer and doing the slaloms and things like that and teaching the basics. So that was kind of interesting. I'm really looking forward to the next 2 episodes, though. So for those of you watching that listen to this, make sure you set your DVRs if you do have Discovery Channel or find some other way to watch it, because the next 2 episodes should be the most interesting. So it's on Monday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern as well as Pacific. They're going to show Oregon Trail Rally, which is the first one that Aaron Kaufman comes and visits the rally and kind of learns more about how rallies are run. And then, of course, they compete at Olympus in the final episode. So the first 3 episodes of that show, of the season opener of that series, is all about rally. And honestly, for those people that are gearheads that don't know anything about rally, I'm so excited to have yet, another place that we can put this sport in front of people.
That's pretty cool that he was able to, do this, tell a story about, being involved in rally. And what I kind of like about this perspective is that it's coming as, even though Aaron's a very well-known guy, he's doing it from the perspective of a complete beginner in the sport. So showing how he gets a car, gets it built, trains for it, goes, spectates and checks out his first event, and then goes and competes is, that's the story, I think, of a lot of us that first got started in rally. We were like, all right, I want to get a car, I want to check this out, see how it goes, and then let's just go do it.
Yeah, he just does it all within a month, where the most of us, the time span would be over a year, probably. But,
yeah.
Other than that, though, you're totally right. And it's also coming from the, home builder grassroots guy, too, right?
Yep.
So, granted, he's got a crew that can do all kinds of amazing stuff to cars, but, in a general sense, it is just they're building it themselves. It's not, they're just renting a car, or, it's not a Fiesta R2 that's already pre-built to a certain spec or anything like that. It is something they're doing all on their own. So that was kind of cool. If you like seeing some neat welds and how that process works, of that first episode, they're going through how the cage certification and how they had to do a test weld and send that over to the UK because they bought a pre-built cage that was an FIA certified cage. So they had to do like a weld, send it off over to the UK, and then they had to sign off that weld was good enough to meet their standards. And then only that guy that did the weld could do the rest of the cage.
Yep.
So he spent a lot of time welding. But, the thing is safety is number one, right? And I totally agree with that whole process, because you want the guy that knows how to do it right and is certified to do it right to be the guy that's making the safety part, right?
Yep. There's no compromise there.
Exactly. So anyways, shifting gears, Discovery Channel, tune into it. The last thing I wanted to mention real quick is just announced today, for those of you sim people out there, which I like to play a little bit when I have time, but obviously that time is short, but we're getting into the end of the season here. So in the wintertime, that's when you can play with simulators and things. Dirt Rally 2 is coming out, and I don't know if you saw that. Do you play with simulators at all?
Yeah, we have a whole simulator lounge at DirtFish, which I think are currently loaded with Dirt 4. We had the original Dirt on there for a while, and I'm hoping that now with this new Dirt 2.0 coming out, that we'll be putting that on all the rigs here. I think it comes out in, February?
Yes, they announced that it will come out in February 2019. What's interesting about this one, so for those of you that have played the Dirt number series, Dirt 1, Dirt 2, Dirt 3, Dirt 4, those are a little more arcade style in that they've got kind of mixed. It's got rally in there, but they've got the stadium truck kind of thing, or short course trucks, and they've got some other stuff mixed in. The Dirt Rally specific series, which is now a series, it was just kind of its own thing, is definitely more simulator based. You need to have a wheel pretty much to drive these things, which you guys got, of course. I think you guys are all set up there with Playseat. Is that right?
Yeah, we have play seats, and I can't remember what pedals that we have. Totally escapes me, but yeah, it's actually a pretty nice setup in there.
I need to get a new wheel, but I've got like a Fanatec setup, but it's old, and some of the new games don't recognize it, so I'm not expecting this one too. So I'm gonna have to get something new. But what I was really excited about this one, they said that you're gonna have tire choices and surface degradation.
Interesting.
Yes. So also interesting in this one is, and I think some of this has to do with licensing deals because of WRC versus the original Dirt Rally. They now have USA, Poland, New Zealand, Argentina, Anyways, Dirt Rally 2.0. It's in pre-sale right now on Steam, on Sony, Xbox, all that stuff. And I'm really excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah, I'll definitely be picking it up when it comes time, along with the new wheel too. I have my old Logitech G27 that doesn't even work on half the stuff either.
Yep. So you're in the same boat I am. Yep, exactly. It's like, gotta get the new stuff, all the Windows 10 compatible stuff and things like that. But
Yep.
I want to ask you real quick, when it comes to sim stuff and just kind of playing around, what do you get out of it? Do you do it for any practice, just like hand-eye coordination stuff or anything like that? Does it help you at all?
I think the only thing that I really like to use it for, and actually I don't play a lot, but I play some, is processing the notes and processing speed. So when I get in it, I like to make sure that I'm in something that's pretty fast so that I can read and interpret the road and take the notes in at a faster pace than I do in real life. So if I play it enough leading up to an event, when I get to the actual rally, I almost prefer that the rally seems slow to me mentally.
Oh yeah,
So
that
that
makes perfect sense.
it's easier to process. And there's other schools of thought of like doing it in real life too, like having like a fast track car and then going to a track where your top speeds are 140 to 160 or something, and then you get to stage speeds where you're in the 60s to 90s for the most part. So yeah, it's not for training of car handling or anything like that. It's just more to process things at speed a little bit better.
And I was actually having some messaging back and forth with some of my rally friends online, and I didn't realize this, but the original Dirt Rally and hopefully in this one as well, you can actually turn off the co-driver completely, and they do it for themselves to train on working with a co-driver. So what they'll do is they'll run the stage they put the tape on their wheel, and
Right.
they'll actually create their own notes, and then they'll rerun it with their co-driver friend so you can still have the exterior sounds on, but you can mute basically what was the co-driver in the game, and they run it like you would a real rally.
Yeah, I've heard of some people doing that. Michelle and I have talked about doing that before, but we never actually done it.
Yeah, I mean, for those folks that want to practice notes, I think that's just a really good idea, especially if we get more and more of these rallies that are, open recce or two-pass recce and, not doing the Jemba thing so much. It's definitely really good practice of some sort, at least getting the processes and procedures down, right?
I mean, that's about as close as you can get to, doing it for real.
That's cool. Well, anyway, super excited for that. Good luck at Tour de Forest. Looking forward to seeing you on that overall podium, you and Michelle. I know you guys have worked really, really hard this year. The car being very new to you, having issues right from the beginning with Oregon Trail, having to get used to the smaller displacement motor with higher RPMs needed. It's a big learning process. Bigger car than what you were driving before and all that stuff. And, here you guys, you're still in it. Obviously not in the class championship, but you could still end up on that overall podium, which would be a huge win for you guys. So
Yeah, absolutely.
hoping you do well.
Thanks, Mike. I really do appreciate it.
Again, thanks for coming on the show and talking about all things rally. I shall not keep you up any later tonight. Any last words before I let you go, man?
Not much. I just hope everybody can make it out to Tour de Forest that can, and if not, pay attention to Mike and Matt, online and doing the live streaming. They've been doing a great job with that. So make sure to pay attention to the rally. It's definitely coming down to the wire for us, and I think there's a couple other big battles that will be happening out there. So hopefully we can keep the excitement going through the final round.
Sounds really good, really good. All right, thanks again, everybody, for listening to the Open Paddock RallyCast. Please make sure you give us a good rating on iTunes, whatever podcast app you use to listen to us. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. And actually, speaking of which, photographs from the Idaho Rally. Tedrick Mealy, good friend of the show, done photographs for us for Open Paddock. He was actually the event photographer for ARA at Idaho. Some of those pics are just fabulous and amazing. So make sure that there's a link to it on our Facebook page. Check out Tedrick Mealy's photographs. He's also available on Facebook. Just an awesome, gorgeous rally for sure. And he'll also be taking pictures out there at Tour de Forest. So anyways, thanks everybody for listening. I'm your host, Mike Shaw, for Sam Albert with the DirtFish Rally team. We'll talk to you all later.